All right, all you cool cats and kittens. Today I immediately regret that, and I'm very, very sorry. Today, let's see if this will let me do this. Why does it always? No, it does. Today we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle. So, settle in, get ready. The menstrual cycle. Just so you know, y'all are going to learn this in more detail than I learned it in nursing school. So you're about to be real menstrual educated. So the menstrual cycle is the cycle in females where it's all about the egg. It's all about the egg. The egg matures. The egg is kicked out of its pocket, which the word for that is ovulated. And then one of two things happens. It gets fertilized by Mr. Sperm. It implants and then you have a baby. Or it does not get fertilized and it just comes out of the woman along with the endometrium, that inner lining that she now realizes she grew for no reason. Kind of rage quits. So this whole process from start to finish usually takes about 28 days, which is why generally it's every month thing. I'll say that this is a perfect world. Not all females are like that. It happens in 4 stages. So there are 4 stages of the menstrual cycle, and here they are. We're going to go into these in great detail. It's the follicle stage, the ovulation stage, the luteal stage, also sometimes fancy called corpus luteum stage, and then the menstruation stage. So one thing to be cued into is don't confuse the menstruation stage with the menstrual cycle. So if we're talking about the menstrual stage, it's just stage 4. If we're talking about the menstrual cycle, it's all of these, okay? A weird thing that the curriculum wants you to know is menarche. So the first time that a female has her period, it is called menarche. Generally, the doctor dictates it. She has achieved menarche. I don't know how much of an achievement it is. All right, so individually, the follicle stage, just from the name, you can tell that the follicle, the pocket that the egg is growing in, is where all the action is in this stage. So things I want you to know about it. First of all, it lasts about 10 days, starting on day 5. So this would kind of be days 1, 2, 3, 4. Kind of this is like day 5, maybe day 1 through 4 are over here. So in a timeline, and I want you to be paying attention to these graphs over here because this is kind of going to be what your assignment is for the day. This would be day 0, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, day 9, day 10, day 11, day. So your days would go on this axis. So starts on about day 5 and lasts for about day 10. The driving hormone during this stage is the follicle stimulating hormone, the FSH. So remember that the pituitary gland releases FSH, and FSH causes the follicle, which is a fancy word for the pocket in the ovary, to develop. And then there are 2 things being grown in those pockets, in those follicles. Number 1 is the egg. So FSH makes the pocket grow and the egg mature. It also makes the pocket grow estrogen. So inside of these pockets, this is representing the pocket in the egg. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the egg is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all the fluid in here would be estrogen. So it grows and matures the egg and it grows estrogen. So we show, so that's the follicle. What's happening to the follicle? It's getting bigger. The egg is getting bigger. The estrogen is growing. So that's why you see this blue line is estrogen. Estrogen is getting super high. This line is FSH because it's important here as well. So FSH rises, and that's what's causing all this to start happening. Then because that FSH rose, estrogen rises because it's growing inside of the follicle along with the egg. And estrogen starts the thickening of the endometrium lining, the inner lining of the uterus. So this down here is how thick the endometrium is. So you can see that it is starting to increase. So estrogen is high, FSH is high, the follicle is growing. Those are the super important things here. All right, next comes the ovulation stage. Ovulation is this right here. Ovulation is the evicting of the egg from its nice, comfortable home and kicking it out into the world. So the hormone that makes this happen, if you remember back from the endocrine system, is LH. LH is a luteinizing hormone. I always think luteinizing sounds like lunar. So I think like the lunar cycle, the thing that happens once a month. What do you do once a month? You ovulate. It's a stretch, but it works for me. So at day 14, and you got to kind of blur your eyes here when you do this math, because I know that we said day 5 and then it lasts 10 days and blah, 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 but for follicle stage. So now we are on day 14. In day 14, the follicle, the pocket that the egg has been growing in, pops, it ruptures, and it kicks the egg out. We call that ovulation. That is the most important thing that happens in the ovulation phase, which happens on around day 14. So again, you have this egg, it pops, not the egg, sorry, this follicle, it pops, the egg is released, and it travels through the fallopian tubes. Again, if it is going to be fertilized, it generally tends to be fertilized right in here. So during this phase, LH is high, and in fact, this is the line for LH. And it's not like this one isn't higher than this one. They're just kind of trying to separate them so that they're not all in the same line. So LH, there's none, there's none, there's none, there's none, there's none. Oh crap, there's a ton. And then there's none, there's none, there's none, there's none. So if there is LH in your system in high amounts, it's ovulation. But you'll see that estrogen is still high. It's still high up here. And FSH has another little surge, another little peak. That's that black line. So on this one day long stage of ovulation, LH is super high, and it's the only time it is. FSH is high, it has peaked again, and estrogen has hit its apex, its most highest concentration as well. So there's that. And here it is circled. So egg has left the building. It's popped out of that follicle. LH is high, estrogen is high, FSH is high, and nothing really has time to happen in the endometrium because this is a one-day long cycle. So this red circle should be much, much smaller. It should just be this tiny little bit right there. Okay, so then the third phase is the luteal phase, which we mentioned yesterday. And I said, you don't know what it is yet, but you'll know it tomorrow. Guess what, guys? It's tomorrow. So luteal phase is all about that endometrium and all about that progesterone. So remember we were calling the pocket that the egg grows in a follicle? Well, after it pops, it's not a follicle anymore. So if you look up here, it's no longer this nice little circle that's getting bigger. It looks like a psychedelic daisy that's kind of floating away, because we don't call the follicle a follicle once it's popped. We start calling it the corpus luteum, which is what this stage is named after. So if you remember over here in the follicle stage, it was growing an egg and it was growing estrogen. Then in ovulation, it kicked the egg out. Now over here, it's instead of making estrogen, it has now switched and starts making progesterone. So that psychedelic daisy that we call the corpus luteum, that used to be the follicle, but then it kicked out its baby, is making progesterone. And it keeps doing this if the egg is fertilized. So it prevents further ovulation and maintains the uterine lining if an egg is fertilized. So if this egg met Mr. Sperm and is fertilized, the fertilized egg will release all these chemicals that say, hey, we need to stay in this phase for like 9 months. So it'll keep that lining thick for 9 months, and you will never go into the next stage, which is where you actually have your period. This is why women don't have their period when they're pregnant. So this is what's happening to the follicle. It's now the corpus luteum. If you notice, the number one hormone here is progesterone. Estrogen's still pretty high, but progesterone is what we really think of with the corpus luteum phase. And it is being made inside of this psychedelic daisy. And the thing that it's doing is thickening up and really thickening. You can see the blood supply here in this endometrium so that baby has a nice place to crash land. This lasts about 2 weeks. So remember, the follicle stage was 10 days. The ovulation part is just one. It's just at day 14. That's all it is. And then this basically takes up another 2 weeks. So I'll leave that here for just a second in case you need to see it. Now, this should be a little further over because once this really starts dipping down, then we're on the menstruation stage. So the menstruation stage in the menstruation cycle is the last stage. It only takes place if the egg hasn't been fertilized. If the egg was fertilized, you stay in this luteal phase for the entire pregnancy. But if the egg is not fertilized, your body realizes that it did all this work for nothing. It gets angry and it rage quits. So the corpus luteum diminishes. That's that super sad little daisy. It's dead now. And so because it's dead now, it stops making progesterone. So you can see that it starts to just plummet. And then the uterine lining that you don't need, that endometrium that's really thick, your body decides to get rid of it. So it pulls it away from the wall of the uterus and discharges it, meaning ejects it from the female body, along with the egg that has now traveled all the way through the fallopian tube and into the uterus and realized its purpose in life is nothing. And so it leaves as well, along with the endometrium. So that is what is being shed during a period, basically. And on average, it takes 3 to 6 days. So that is here and also kind of here. So it usually starts on day 28 and then lasts through day like 4 or 5 when the follicle phase starts. So some curriculums will have it start on day 28 and some curriculums will have it start on day 1. It's kind of like if you've ever played cards, you know how an ace can be high or low. It can be like ace 2, 3, 4, or it can also be jack, queen, king, ace, like that. It just depends on where you want to put it. But so what's happening is all the hormones plummet. Everything's low. This is dead, and this is coming out of you if you're a girl. If you're not, you're thanking God that you're not. Okay, so this is basically going to be your assignment for today. I do not want you to just copy this because I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking that you understand it. I want to see, so days, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And if you want to, you can just put like day 1, day 5, day 14, day 28, like the days that the actual phases start, and then label the phases. So day 5 up until day 14, it should say follicle stage or follicular is another form of it. And then I want to see the follicle getting bigger, and I want to see FSH high and estrogen high. I don't care that this is high early and this is high late. I just want to see in the follicle stage FSH and estrogen high. Then on day 14, I want to see the follicle kick the egg out. I want to see LH really high and estrogen and FSH still really high. And subtly this was getting bigger. And then in the luteal phase, the endometrium gets super huge and progesterone is really high. You're welcome to put estrogen high as well. It is, but your curriculum really cues into the progesterone and the psychedelic daisy here. And then you'll have the menstrual stage, either at the end or in the beginning, I don't care, but it's kind of days 1 through 4 or 5 where everything is just sad. Any questions? Cool. So we're going to do just this one thing and then we will stop. So menopause is technically the last function in the female reproductive system. I always kind of think of it as a disorder, but it really is just a normal progression of the female life. A lot of times women call this the change or the change in life. I love this. I'm still hot. It just comes in flashes now because hot flashes are one of the number one things that we associate with menopause. Let's go through it. It's when the monthly menstrual cycle comes to an end, usually starts between ages of 45 and 55, and it kind of slowly stops. It's not like one day you're having normal periods and then the next day it's done. Over a year or so, your periods become very, very irregular, kind of like they were when you first started menstruating, and then they cease to go away. So you stop growing follicles, you stop growing eggs, you stop ovulating, and all of this stops because hormones. What runs your life? Hormones. So as you age, your normal hormone concentration and level just starts to decrease. And once they get low enough, it will stop all the follicles growing and ovulation and all that because it was run by hormones in the first place. Just so you know, no matter what age you are, if you have a surgery called an oophorectomy, remember ectomy is a surgical removal of, and I said all your double O's usually have something to do with the ovary. So you've probably heard of a hysterectomy. Hysterectomy is where you remove the uterus of a woman. If you take the uterus out, she can't have kids, true, because there's nowhere to grow them, but that doesn't remove hormones. Uterus doesn't make hormones. What makes hormones? Ovaries. And menopause happens because of a lack of hormones. So an oophorectomy is when you surgically remove the ovaries. Surgical removal of one or both ovaries. So my sister-in-law at 35 had cervical cancer, and they did radiation, and the radiation fried her ovaries. So she went into menopause at 35 because of the damage to the ovaries. If we damage or remove your ovaries, generally they can't make your estrogen and progesterone anymore, because remember, they're made in the pocket and then the little psychedelic daisy corpus luteum later on. So if you can't make estrogen and progesterone at high enough levels, you go into menopause. How will you know you have gone into menopause? So again, there's a phase, there's a period that's called perimenopause, right leading up to menopause, and in the months or the year or so leading up to, you start having very irregular periods. Maybe they're really heavy or really light, or very infrequent. There's no consistency to when they're going to come anymore. And that's usually a sign that you're about to go into menopause. It presents with vaginal dryness. Again, this is because of hormone, a decrease in hormone. Hot flashes. I used to think women were just complaining and being dramatic, and that's, a lot of how medicine looks at women. But I read somewhere that not their core temperature, not deep in their body, but their skin can spike up to 106 degrees in like 30 seconds. So these hot flashes are super, super miserable. Night sweats, again, because of hormone changes. Fatigue, let's see, nope, that's it. So again, hot flashes, irritability. A lot of times, these people are not happy. But look, they're so hot. It just comes in flashes. All right, guys, I miss y'all. Heart you. Let me know if you need me. Bye.